All right, so you want to be a better leader, right? Well, one of the biggest things is making sure everyone on your team feels safe and respected.
Yeah, totally. And that's something that Gold Seal really nails down as a key skill for anyone looking to get that certification.
Exactly. In their managed field and project staff area, they specifically call out addressing harassment complaints and issues.
And it's not just some box to check off. This goes way deeper.
Oh, for sure. Today, let's dive into exactly why that is. This is a big one.
It really is. Like when you think about what makes a project successful, you got to think about the team
Hmm.
and how that team functions. And
Right.
addressing harassment, well, that's straight up ethical leadership.
Right, and it can keep you out of some serious legal hot water.
Huge legal risks if you don't handle this right. Yeah.
Yeah.
But beyond even that, think about building a team that can actually perform at its best.
Okay, so let's say we've got a project that's under a tight deadline.
Okay.
How does a culture of respect, or the lack of it, actually play out in that scenario?
You see it instantly. Think about it. If people are constantly worried about being harassed or disrespected,
Yeah.
that's going to kill collaboration. It's going to stifle communication.
Right, it just creates this environment of tension, right?
Exactly. Nobody's going to perform well like that.
It's almost like this underlying distraction that just permeates everything.
It impacts the bottom line for sure.
So let's get into the nuts and bolts of how to address harassment complaints.
The Gold Seal material, it breaks it down into some pretty clear steps. What's the first one we should hit?
Well, it all starts with awareness
Okay.
and prevention.
Right. Like even before something happens, you got to be
Proactive.
proactive. Yeah.
Yeah. Get those policies in place, get the training happening.
What does that training look like? Give me an example.
So you can do role playing, have people go through different scenarios, see how to identify harassment,
Mm-hmm.
and then practice how to respond to it.
Mm.
Another good one is bystander intervention training. Oh, that's a good one. So it's not just about knowing the rules, but actually feeling empowered to do something.
Exactly. Everyone on the team should know they have a role to play in creating a safe environment.
Right. And that kind of leads into the next step, right? Having these clear reporting mechanisms in place.
Yeah, and this is all about trust.
Okay.
If something does happen, people need to feel confident that they can report it.
And that'll be taken seriously.
Exactly. And that it's confidential. You need multiple avenues for reporting, too. Someone might feel more comfortable talking to their supervisor.
Mm.
Someone else might prefer going straight to HR. You could even have an anonymous reporting system.
Especially on a construction site. You know how rumors can fly.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. That's where a prompt investigation is super important.
Right. So if something is reported, what happens next?
Well, you have to investigate.
Yeah.
And it needs to be impartial.
That sounds tricky. How do you keep things impartial when everyone knows each other?
It can be tough, but it's crucial for protecting both the person making the complaint and the person being accused. You might need to bring in someone from outside.
Oh, like a third party.
Yeah, a third-party investigator, just to keep things objective. And you might need to reassign people temporarily.
Okay, so like while the investigation's happening.
Right. You want to prevent any interference or retaliation.
Yeah, absolutely. You don't want to make the situation worse.
And documentation.
Okay.
So important. Every step of the way needs to be documented meticulously.
So let's say the investigation wraps up and it turns out harassment did occur. What then? We've got to enforce the policies, right?
Absolutely. That's where those corrective actions come in.
Okay.
Could be disciplinary action,
Mm-hmm.
mandatory retraining,
Okay.
maybe even mediation between the parties.
So it's not always about like coming down hard on someone.
Right. It's about making sure everyone understands how serious this is and that there are real consequences for violating the policy.
And the gold seal material, it really emphasizes supporting everyone who's been affected.
Yeah. We can't forget about the human element.
It's easy to just focus on like the policy side of things.
Right. But think about it. The complainant might need counseling. The person accused might need support too.
Yeah. It's a stressful situation all around.
And the whole team may need some guidance on how to move forward.
Okay, so we've talked about awareness, reporting, investigation, taking action. What's the last piece of the puzzle?
Ongoing monitoring.
Oh, interesting. So it's not like we just deal with the issue and move on.
Nope. Harassment doesn't always end with a single investigation.
That's a good point. So what does that monitoring look like?
Well, you want to create a culture where people feel comfortable speaking up.
Right. And know that if they do, there won't be any blowback.
Exactly. So regular check-ins can be helpful, maybe some anonymous surveys to gauge how people are feeling, and just generally keeping an eye on the overall team dynamic.
So all of this makes sense in like a typical workplace setting. But what about in construction specifically?
You've got diverse crews working in close quarters, often under a lot of pressure, sometimes in really remote locations.
Yeah, it's a unique environment.
And the industry's still, shaking off some of those old school attitudes.
Right. So this stuff becomes even more important.
Yeah, you got to be on top of it.
And legally, we're talking about compliance with the Canada Labor Code and all the provincial human rights legislation.
Absolutely. And if you look at some standard contracts like the CCDC 11, there's language in there about providing a harassment-free work environment. It's a contractual obligation.
Not just like a nice to have.
Right. It's baked into the way we do business in construction.
Okay, so big picture, what are the benefits of handling these complaints effectively? Like, what's the payoff?
Well, it just makes everything run smoother. You create a safer, more respectful workplace. That leads to better morale.
Right.
People communicate better. Productivity goes up. People are more likely to go the extra mile when they feel valued.
So we're talking about a better reputation,
Yep,
fewer lawsuits,
for sure.
and a stronger team overall.
Absolutely. And don't forget, this stuff can really impact your ability to attract and retain top talent.
That's a great point. In today's market, people have options.
They do. Companies that prioritize a positive and inclusive culture, they're going to have an edge.
Okay, so for everyone listening, whether you're managing a small team or a huge project, this stuff is essential. What's one final thought you'd leave our listeners with?
Think about this. How can you, as a leader or a team member, contribute to making your workplace more respectful? It starts with understanding these principles, but then you got to take action. You got to challenge those off-color jokes, speak up if you see something that's not right, and advocate for that culture of respect.
We all have a role to play in creating a work environment that's free from harassment. We'll include some resources in the show notes for anyone who wants to dive deeper. Seek out further training if you'd like. Keep learning.
Yeah, keep the conversation going. It benefits everyone.
Exactly. All right, thanks for being here today.
My pleasure.
And to everyone listening, thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time for another deep dive.